Well, good evening. First, Admiral Carter, let me tell you what a real honor it is for me to be here tonight. I had a pretty good career in the Navy, but if I have one regret, it is that I did not have an opportunity to attend this magnificent institution. And I am incredibly proud to be here tonight to represent all those that didn't and all those of you that will serve in uniform. I also want to recognize my very good friend, General John Sattler. Now, for those of you that have not had a chance to meet John Sattler, I will tell you he is one of the great Marines of this generation. I first met John Sattler in 2003 when I was a one-star at the Joint Special Operations Command, and General Sattler was the J3 at CENTCOM. Every hour of every day, there was a crisis. And just about every hour of every day, I was calling John Sattler. And he always handled every crisis with great ease, with great compassion, and with great interest. And then, of course, he goes on to lead one of the great battles of the war in Iraq, the Battle of Fallujah. John, it has truly been my honor to have served with you, and thanks for inviting me here tonight. Thank you. So this holiday season, I had all of my three children came in, and as always, we watched the Christmas classic, It's a Wonderful Life. Now, I don't know how many of you and whether that's part of your tradition, but let me set the stage for you. So It's a Wonderful Life, it was directed by a fellow named Frank Capra, who was one of the famous directors of the era, and it stars Jimmy Stewart, who was one of the great actors of the 40s, 50s, and 60s. And the movie is set in about the early 1930s. And Jimmy Stewart plays George Bailey. And George Bailey starts off the movie as a young man and grows up in the course of the movie. And George Bailey always wants to get out of this town of Bedford Falls. Bedford Falls is a small town. You don't really know where it is, but you kind of get this sense maybe it's somewhere in upstate New York. There are a couple of other characters in the movie. There is the mean Mr. Potter. Mr. Potter is the local banker, and Mr. Potter wants to own everybody's money. He wants to own the people in the town. So you got mean Mr. Potter. Then you've got Mary, sweet Mary. She is the girlfriend of George Bailey, and later on becomes George's wife. You've got Uncle Billy. He is the kind of befuddled old uncle who helps run this savings and loan that George Bailey is responsible for. And then you have Harry Bailey. And Harry Bailey was George's younger brother. And when they were both very young, Harry Bailey fell through the ice when he was about 5 years old, and George goes out on the ice and saves Harry Bailey. So as the movie begins, you go through this story of George Bailey and always wanting to get out of Bedford Falls, but always getting drawn back in. He wants to go do big things, but something always happens and he's always forced to stay in Bedford Falls. Well, as the movie goes on, hard times fall on George Bailey, and he decides he's going to end his life by jumping off a bridge. And from above, God looks down on George Bailey, and he says, we can't have this happen. So he sends an angel named Clarence. And Clarence is sort of an oddball character, and Clarence is trying to earn his wings. Well, Clarence comes to Earth, and he tells George Bailey that he's an angel, and of course George doesn't believe it. And Clarence decides the only way to convince George not to commit suicide, not to jump off a bridge, is to show George Bailey what life would be like if he never was born. If George Bailey was never born, what would life be like? So all of a sudden, life has changed. And of course, George, not believing this, walks back into the town of Bedford Falls, but it's no longer Bedford Falls, it's Potterville. And Mr. Potter has taken over. Mary, the woman that he married, is an old maid librarian. Everything has changed. But then comes what I think is the seminal moment in the movie. They go to the town cemetery, and as Clarence and George are walking into the cemetery, there is the headstone of young Harry Bailey. And of course, George says, well, that's not true. Harry lived. I saved Harry. He not only lived, he went on to become a Medal of Honor recipient. In World War II, he saved the lives of 500 men on a Navy ship. And Clarence says, but George, you weren't there to save Harry. And because you weren't there to save Harry, those 500 men on that ship all perished. And then all of a sudden you realize that the one act from one person, all of a sudden saved the lives not only of Harry Bailey, but of the 500 men on the ship, and their children, and their children's children, and their children's children. It was all about destiny, about George Bailey's destiny. But if you think it's only a movie, let me tell you another story. A couple of years ago, I was watching a documentary about Japan's top ace. His name was Saburo Saki. Saki had 64 confirmed kills. And in this documentary, he's telling the story through a translator of one day in 1942 where he is in the Pacific. And his squadron of Zeros have come across a flight of U.S. bombers. And one by one, he starts picking off the bombers. And he starts to look down at his gas gauge, or he looks down at his gas gauge and he realizes he's running a little low, but there's one more bomber he wants to get. So he starts to come in on this guy, but the bomber pilot realizes he's got a zero on his tail, so he starts to maneuver in and out of the clouds. But Saburo knows he can take this guy. So he waits, all of a sudden the clouds clear, and the ace swings down behind, the zero is right behind the bomber, and Saburo looks at his gas gauge and realizes he doesn't have the extra 30 seconds to set up, and he breaks contact and heads back to his base. And on that bomber was a young lieutenant commander named Lyndon Baines Johnson, the 36th president of the United States. That one event in 1942 changed the world. Lyndon Johnson goes on to push the civil rights, has the Great Society, probably changes more about America as we know it today than any single president in the last several decades because of one act. So why am I telling you all about these stories? Because it's all about destiny. It is what makes the United States Naval Academy different than any other place in the nation, with maybe the exception of West Point and the Air Force Academy. You have put yourselves in the path of history. You have put yourselves on a path that others will never see. You think about it. Among you somewhere is the next chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, or a chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. Among you are probably 2 Chiefs of Naval Operations. There's probably 2 Commandant of the Marine Corps here. There are 20 or 30 admirals. There are probably several hundred commanding officers. Think about it. You will affect the lives of 100 men and women, 1,000, 10,000, 100,000, 1,000,000. You think Chester Nimitz knew when he came here in 1901, or Ernest King, that they would go on to be fleet admirals? That they would affect the lives of millions of people? No, I bet they didn't. Nor did John McCain, or Mike Mullen, or my former boss, Eric Olson, who was the first SEAL 3-star and 4-star, or John Allen, or John Sattler, or astronauts Alan Shepard, Bill Shepard, Chris Cassidy, Nicole Mann, Joe Metcalf, and the list goes on and on and on. You would not be on this course to intersect history if you went to UVA, or if you went to UNC and got a degree in political science, or you went to Georgia Tech, one of the great universities in the States, to get a degree in engineering. It would not be the same. Your destiny would be a lot less constrained. So how are you going to know it? How are you going to know it when you see destiny in front of you? What does it look like? How will you know the decisions you need to make? Well, the first thing I'll tell you is destiny is about when others won't or can't do something. It's when others are too scared, too weak-kneed, too hesitant. Who among you will go to Mars? Who's going to be the first female SEAL? Who's going to stand up against the injustices and the violations of the Constitution? Who will do what others can't? Well, I will tell you, destiny is probably easy to see in combat. It kind of stares you right in the face. I guarantee you, Captain John Cromwell, when he commanded the USS Sculpin in World War II, He knew what he was doing when he took that submarine and took it to the bottom and saved his entire crew. He stayed with his submarine so he could save his entire crew. I guarantee you, the CEO of that sub knew exactly what destiny looked like at that point in time. Or how about Lieutenant John Bulkeley, when he took his PT boat and went into the Philippines to pull Douglas MacArthur off an island. Imagine how that act changed everything. What if MacArthur had not gotten off that island in the Philippines? Because John Bulkeley went here, and he knew he had put himself in harm's way, and he knew what destiny looked like because it was staring him right in the face. Or how about Jim Webb in 1969, and the Marine that he saved? And he goes on to be the Secretary of the Navy and a senator. I guarantee you, Jim Webb knew the action he had to take right at that moment in time. Or what about Eric Christensen? Lieutenant Commander Eric Christensen, who on June 28, 2005, boarded a helicopter call sign Turbine 33, along with 15 of his other SEALs, and went up to northern Pakistan in Konar province to save his brothers. Turbine 33 was shot down as it approached the LZ, and everybody on board was killed. But if you think for 1 second that Eric Christensen has not had an impact on this Naval Academy, on every SEAL that is alive today and that will be alive in the future, you're mistaken. Every SEAL from here on out will know what his responsibility is. It will be our responsibility to get on the next Turbine 33 and to go save our fellow SEALs, because Eric Christensen did it. And if we get shot down 99 times out of 100, that'll be okay, because Eric Christensen did it. And the one time that we get through, we will save more lives. And it'll be worth it, because Eric Christensen and his men did the same thing. But it's not just about combat, although destiny definitely favors the brave. You have to have the same courage and the same sense of purpose when confronted with life's injustices. Because let me tell you, that's a little harder to see. It's not as easy to see as when you're in combat. But when you see a senior officer misbehaving, what are you going to do? That's when destiny confronts you. When you see institutional corruption, or when it's your team, the one you lead, that's doing things that are illegal, immoral, or unethical, how will destiny change the lives of others? What if one person stepped up in My Lai in Vietnam? Or one person stepped up at Tailhook? Or one person stepped up during a cheating scandal? How would that have changed the lives of thousands? Trust me, that's as important as the changes in combat, but it's harder to see sometimes. So how will you be successful when this opportunity presents itself? There it is. It's staring you right in the face. You see destiny there. It's a small window. It's in the upper right-hand corner. I've seen it many, many times before. How do you know? How are you going to be prepared? Well, the first thing you need to know is you better damn well know your business. You better know how to drive that ship, fly that plane, command that submarine, or be a great staff member. You better know your business and know it very, very well, because that's the only way you see options. That's the only way you see opportunities, is when you see everything, when you know all of the risks that you'll have to take. I used to say my boss, Admiral Eric Olson, who graduated from the Naval Academy, was one of the best decision makers I've ever been around. In all the years that I worked for Admiral Olson, he and I disagreed a lot. And I will tell you, he was always right. It chapped my ass, but he was always right. And he was always right because Admiral Olson had done everything there was to do in the Naval Special Warfare community. He had been a SEAL, he'd been a Special Boats, he'd been a SEAL delivery guy, he'd been a Dev Group, he had been on the Navy staff. He knew his business backwards and forwards, and that's what made him so very, very good. When we were getting ready to do the Laden Raid, I remember one of the principals sitting around the table in the Situation Room stopped and asked me, "Well, Admiral, how many times have you been involved in these kind of combat operations that we're getting ready to do?" And I thought for a minute, and I said, "Over 10,000 times. over 10,000 times since 2003, I had either been on a mission, approved a mission, run a mission, been part of a mission. 10,000 times. That's why I knew what to do when destiny was staring me right in the face, because I knew my business. You have to believe in yourself. This comes with preparation. It's a little bit like knowing your business, but frankly, you have to outwork everybody out there. You got to out-prepare, you got to out-hustle the other guy or gal. I remember several years ago, I had been in a parachute accident, and I was at the White House working on the National Security Council staff. And I had a break, had a day to come down to Virginia Beach, opportunity to spend some time with the SEALs. And I was still rehabbing. I could barely walk at the time. The parachute accident broke me up pretty good. But I decided I was going to go down and do the best I could at PT, and then they were going to do a 5-mile run. So we start off on the run, and frankly, I can kind of barely walk, but I'm going to try and make it through the run. And it was a 3-mile loop. And at one point in time, of course, all the guys are lapping me. And I remember this one Navy captain, junior Navy captain, comes up to me and he says, "Hey, sir, why are you doing this? You don't have anything to prove anymore." And you know what? He was absolutely wrong. Every single day that you wake up and you wear this uniform, and I don't care what's on your chest, you got to wake up and you got to say, "I've got to prove to everybody out there that I'm the very best there is. I've got to work, and I've got to earn this uniform every single day." And if you do that, again, when destiny is staring you in the face, it will be a hell of a lot easier. You got to instill faith in others. So not only do you have to have faith in yourself, you have to instill faith in others. Last weekend, I was with Heisman Trophy winner Roger Staubach, one of the great football players here at the Naval Academy. And it was a weekend event, and I had an opportunity to interview Roger. And at one point in time, I said, "You know, you were known as the comeback kid." That's who you were, Roger Staubach, the comeback kid. So how did you do that? How did you know that you were always going to come back in the fourth quarter with 2 minutes down? And he said, "You know, that part was easy." He said, "I had confidence in myself. I knew he could come back. But that wasn't the hard part about coming back. The hard part about coming back was instilling in everybody around me that we could come back. That's what made the comebacks work." So when you start looking destiny in the face, it's not just about you. It's about whether or not you can instill confidence in the people around you. I will tell you also, you can't be afraid to fail, particularly not in combat. I know the gentleman sitting at this table here would tell you that in the course of their career, they failed a lot, and I am absolutely no exception. In combat, when you fail in combat, frankly, the consequences are a lot more dire. But I can remember in early 2011, I had been notified that Osama bin Laden we thought somewhere in Pakistan. We didn't know it was bin Laden. We were kind of preparing for the mission at the time, but in the meantime, I had a lot of other things going on. And we had a pirate incident off the coast of Somalia. Well, I'd dealt with pirates a lot of times before. And I knew how this thing was going to unfold. I knew exactly what was going to happen, and that we were going to be able to rescue the 4 Americans that were on the ship, and the pirates would eventually give up, and we'd send them back to Somalia, or we'd bring them back to the States. Except that's not what happened. They executed the 4 Americans. And to this day, I look back and say, what could I have done differently? What decisions could I have made? And I have relived that over and over again, but I will tell you what I didn't do. Right at that moment, I realized that somewhere something had gone wrong and 4 lives were lost. But I had other decisions to make. I still had men in combat every single hour of every single day. And it was my responsibility to continue to make the decisions in spite of the fact that I had failed on that one. And as we approached the decisions on bin Laden, I kept looking in the rearview mirror at those Somali pirates, but I knew I had to make the next decision, because if you're afraid to make the next decision, then you'll never meet destiny head on. So what happens if destiny calls and you don't answer? Well, back in 1977, I had just started basic SEAL training. And I remember they lined us all up. All these guys will remember that are wearing tridents. They lined us all up on a grinder, which is the asphalt grinder we had at the Coronado. We had 150 155 guys in class. The SEAL instructor comes out, and we're all standing at attention. We're at a point interval. He said, gentlemen, he said, you're about to start the toughest military training in the world. He said, you're going to have to run long every day. You're going to have long swims. You're going to have obstacle courses, and there's going to be a lot of pain. And I'm going to make sure that there is a lot of pain. If you want to quit, all you have to do is ring this brass bell. And he pulled it hard one time. Clang kind of went out throughout the grinder. He said, if you ring this bell 3 times, you walk away. And you don't have to endure the pain. You don't have to do the long swims. You don't have to do the long runs. And he pulled that clanger again, and the bell rang again. And he stopped what I think was his prepared remarks, because I watched his body language change a little bit. And he said, but if you do, if you quit, you will regret it for the rest of your life. 6 months later, the 155 guys we started with were down to 33. And I'm pretty convinced that all of those that quit regretted it for the rest of their lives. But it's not just about regretting it. It's about the fact that they didn't have an opportunity to continue to change other lives. Most of them got out of the Navy after that. And they were not in a position to change history. How many lives did they change by blinking when destiny was in their face? There's a great quote by William James Bryan. It says, destiny is no matter of chance. It is a matter of choice. It is not a thing to be waited for. It is a thing to be achieved. You made the choice to come to the United States Naval Academy. It was the right choice. If you step up when destiny calls, you will change history forever. But if you fail to do what is right, when destiny stares you in the face, then the lives of thousands and 10,000s will be irreversibly altered. And like Bedford Falls, without George Bailey, the world will be a lesser place because you didn't confront your destiny. Your destiny is right here. It is right now. And I am very, very confident that the future of the nation and the future of this world is in great hands. Thank you all very much for allowing me to join you tonight. Again, it is one of the great honors of my life and my career to be here. Thank you very much.